The river was silent. The night was empty, until something came out of the dark and attacked him. They hit the ground hard, dust exploded, bones strained, breath collided. A man fought like his life depended on it, until he realized he was wrestling with God. This is the story of Jacob, the man who wrestled God. The night Jacob left home, no one said goodbye. There was no ceremony, no blessing at the door, only silence. The house that once felt divided now felt empty, and Jacob walked away from it with nothing but a staff and the echo of his brother's vow ringing in his mind. I will kill him. The words followed him into the desert. The chosen son had become a fugitive, and for the first time in his life, there was no mother whispering strategy in his ear, no tent walls to hide behind, only open sky and guilt. The desert does something to a man. It strips him. No distractions, no applause, no comparison, just wind and memory. He had walked until the ground no longer felt like earth, just distance, just escape, just survival. The desert was no longer scenery, it was judgment. Each step whispered what he refused to say out loud. You stole it. You lied. You ran. The sun had burned away pride by day. Now night came to finish the job. No tents, no servants, no mother's voice strategizing in the background. Just him, and silence so thick it felt alive. Jacob scanned the horizon, nothing but darkness folding into itself. He had always controlled rooms, controlled outcomes, controlled narratives, but the desert did not care who he was. It reduced him to a man with a stick. He lowered himself to the ground, exhaustion dragging him down like gravity had grown heavier. His hands searched for comfort and found only stone, a rock. That would be his pillow. The irony almost made him laugh. The man who stole a blessing, now resting his head on something that could crack his skull. He lay back. The stars above him were violent in their brilliance. Too many, too endless. He felt small for the first time in his life, and smallness frightened him more than his brother's threat, because small meant exposed, and exposed meant known. His breathing slowed, but his mind did not. He saw his father's blind eyes. He heard his brother's broken voice. He felt the animal skins on his arms. He tasted deception. His chest tightened. What if the blessing was never meant for him? What if he forced open a door that heaven never unlocked? The desert did not answer. Sleep came like collapse. And then, the ground beneath him shifted, not physically, existentially. Darkness cracked, a soundless thunder rolled across reality, and he saw it. A structure rising from earth to something beyond sky, not built of wood, not made of stone, but of light. A ladder. No, a corridor, a bridge, a fracture in dimensions. It pierced the heavens, and movement filled it. Angels ascending, descending, not chaotic, purposeful, precise, like traffic between worlds. Jacob tried to move. He couldn't. His body felt pinned beneath the weight of revelation. This was no dream stitched together by anxiety. This felt invasive, overwhelming, terrifying. The air vibrated, and then a presence stood above it, not distant, not abstract, above, watching. Authority radiated downward like gravity. And then the voice. It did not shout, it did not rage, but it carried a force that rearranged molecules. I am the God of your father. Jacob's pulse thundered in his ears. He expected exposure. He expected accusation. He expected a divine courtroom listing his crimes. Instead, promise, land, descendants, presence. I am with you. The words struck harder than judgment. With you?
After what I did? The ladder shimmered. The messengers continued their movement. He understood something in that moment that terrified him. Heaven had never been disconnected.
While he manipulated in tents, while he lied in shadows, while he ran across deserts, there was traffic between realms. He had not escaped surveillance. He had not fallen off destiny. He had not outrun God. The blessing was not stolen. It was sovereign. And sovereignty was far more frightening than punishment, because sovereignty meant he was chosen on purpose. The vision intensified. Light pulsed brighter. The ground trembled. Jacob felt himself dissolving under it. All his cleverness, all his strategy, all his self-made identity, cracking. What if this is not about outsmarting? What if this is about surrender? The thought terrified him, because surrender meant losing control, and control had always been his weapon. The presence spoke again. I will not leave you. Not leave, not abandon, not revoke. The ladder burned brighter, and then silence. Darkness slammed back into place. Jacob's eyes snapped open. He was on the ground, the stones still under his head, but the air felt different, charged, sacred, dangerous. He shot upright, breathing like a man pulled from deep water. The desert had not changed, but he had. He looked around wildly, half expecting the ladder to still be there. Nothing, just stars, but they no longer looked indifferent. They looked watched. He stood slowly, his legs weak, his heart pounding like it had been rewired. This place, he whispered, voice shaking, this place is terrifying. Not beautiful, not peaceful, terrifying, because it meant God was not confined to temples, not confined to tradition, not confined to moral perfection. God invaded deserts. God invaded fugitives. God invaded manipulators sleeping on rocks. He picked up the stone, the same stone that supported his head during collapse. He stood it upright, marked it, not as a monument to his strength, but as evidence of interruption. He poured oil over it with trembling hands. This was not ritual. This was response. If you bring me back, he said quietly into the night, then you will be my God. It was not a perfect vow. It was still transactional, still Jacob, but something deeper had shifted. He had seen the structure behind reality. He had glimpsed traffic between heaven and earth. He knew now he was not running alone. And that realization was more unsettling than comforting, because if God was with him, then transformation was inevitable. The desert wind moved again, but it no longer sounded empty. It sounded alive. Jacob picked up his staff. The fugitive continued walking, but the man who rose from that stone was no longer just a deceiver. He was a marked man, and heaven had just announced it. The journey had already stripped Jacob down to instinct. Dust clung to his skin. Exile clung to his thoughts. He arrived at the well like a man who had outrun death, but not memory. Women gathered. Sheep shifted impatiently. The stone over the well was massive, communal, immovable, waiting. And then he saw her. She moved differently, not fragile, not timid, confident without knowing she was being watched. Something in him, tired, hunted, fractured, paused. When she reached the stone, Jacob stepped forward without thinking. Muscles tightened, pride flared. He rolled the stone away alone. It wasn't just strength, it was declaration. I am not weak. I am not broken. I am still capable. She looked at him, curious, almost startled. He wept when he told her who he was, not from romance, from relief. For the first time since fleeing his brother, someone recognized him, and that recognition felt like oxygen. But someone else was watching, Laban, and Laban did not see a nephew. He saw opportunity. Laban embraced him loudly, too loudly.
Hospitality dripped like honey, thick, sweet, excessive. "You are my own flesh and blood." The words felt warm, but warmth can hide calculation. Jacob offered to work for Rachel. 7 years, a transaction disguised as devotion. Laban nodded slowly, agreed too easily, and that should have been the first warning. But love has a way of muting suspicion.
7 years passed like a few days, but only because Jacob was chasing a future. He worked relentlessly, proving himself, building value, believing labor would secure love. Laban watched quietly. The older man had patience. Predators often do. The feast exploded with sound, music, wine, celebration thick in the air. Rachel was veiled. Custom demanded it. Jacob didn't question it. He had learned before that darkness can hide strategy, but this time he was drunk on anticipation. Night swallowed clarity. Morning revealed betrayal. The woman beside him was Leah. Silence filled the room like smoke. He stared at her face. She stared back, ashamed, wounded, complicit. Outside, Laban waited. When Jacob confronted him, the old man's voice was calm. "It is not our custom to give the younger before the older." The words hit like a blade. The younger before the older. Jacob felt the irony crawl under his skin. This was not just deception. This was poetic justice. "You can have the other daughter," Laban added casually. "Work another 7 years." 14 years now. 14 years for one woman. Love had become leverage, and Jacob agreed. Not because he was naive, but because obsession is stronger than pride. The second marriage did not bring peace, it brought fracture. Leah wanted love, Rachel wanted children, Jacob wanted control, but control had left the building long ago. Leah conceived quickly, each son born like a silent plea, "See me, choose me, love me." Rachel watched her sister swell with motherhood and felt invisible. Jealousy turned the tense cold. Whispers replaced laughter. Rachel confronted Jacob in private. "Give me children or I die." The statement wasn't dramatic. It was desperate. Jacob snapped back, anger misdirected. "Am I God?" That was the moment the house changed. Competition escalated. Servants offered as surrogates. Children born into rivalry. Names carrying emotional warfare. Each birth wasn't just a blessing, it was a scoreboard. Jacob walked through his growing household and felt something familiar. Tension, favoritism, division. He had fled a broken family. He had recreated it. And somewhere in the chaos, God was still working, quietly, unseen. Leah, unloved, continued to bear sons. Rachel, desired, remained barren. The pattern was intentional, divine inversion. God was not rewarding charisma, he was lifting the overlooked, and Jacob couldn't control it. That terrified him more than Laban. After 14 years, Jacob asked to leave. Laban refused without refusing. "You have prospered because of you," Laban said smoothly. "Name your wages." It sounded generous. It was strategic. Jacob proposed a deal involving the weaker livestock, spotted, speckled, rejected animals. He would take those. Laban agreed instantly. Another red flag. That night, Laban secretly removed the very animals that qualified for Jacob's wages, moved them far away. Manipulation within manipulation. But Jacob had changed. He no longer relied solely on trickery. He relied on something else. He began breeding selectively, using methods that seemed simple, almost strange, but the outcome defied logic. The weaker flocks multiplied, the strong ones weakened. Jacob's wealth expanded rapidly. It wasn't luck, it wasn't magic, it was divine interference. Laban's sons noticed first. Their eyes shifted. "He has taken what was our father's." The air thickened. Laban stopped smiling.
The warmth evaporated. The house that once welcomed him now watched him closely. Danger returned. Different face, same tension. One night, God spoke again, not with ladders, with clarity. Return to your father's land. The instruction carried urgency. Jacob gathered his wives secretly, explained the manipulation, the wage changes, the hostility. For once, Leah and Rachel agreed. Their father had used them too. They were not daughters, they were bargaining chips. Something unified them, shared betrayal, shared exhaustion. And that unity became the trigger. They would leave, but not publicly, not ceremonially, quietly, strategically. Jacob knew Laban, and Laban would not release profit willingly. Laban was away shearing sheep. The household moved swiftly. Tents dismantled, children gathered, flocks organized. Rachel hesitated, then did something dangerous. She took her father's household idols, not out of devotion, but defiance. It was subtle rebellion, and it would nearly cost them everything. They fled, crossed the Euphrates, put distance between manipulation and survival. But Laban noticed quickly. 7 days later, dust rose on the horizon. He was coming with men. The past was chasing them again. Night fell before confrontation. God appeared to Laban in a dream, a warning. Do not speak good or bad to him. When they finally stood face to face, the tension was electric. Accusations flew. You stole from me. You deceived me. You would have sent me away empty. Years of exploitation spilled into the open field. Jacob's voice trembled, not with fear, but release. He recounted every wage change, every manipulation, every silent endurance. This was no longer the young deceiver. This was a man who survived deception. Laban searched the tents for his idols. Rachel sat on them, claiming illness. The irony thick, the idol worshiper unable to detect what sat beneath him. Eventually, exhaustion overtook anger. A covenant was made.
Stones stacked between them. A boundary, not of friendship, of limitation. Laban turned back, and for the first time in 20 years, Jacob stood free. Not because he outwitted, but because God intervened. Jacob watched Laban disappear into the distance. The man who once manipulated had been manipulated. The man who once stole had been exploited. The man who once ran from consequences now stood having endured them. But the camera doesn't fade to peace, because ahead of him was his brother, and the war that started in the womb. The house of Laban was not his destination, it was his transformation. The deceiver entered, a marked, humbled, sharpened man left. An exile had done what comfort never could. It changed him. Then came the message that froze his blood. Your brother is coming to meet you. Time collapsed. The desert night returned in his memory. The vow, the hatred, the exile. Everything he had built could end in one encounter. He divided his camp strategically. Old habits. The river was black, not reflective, not peaceful. Black like something that swallows what falls into it. Jacob stood on its edge, watching his entire life cross without him. Wives first, children next, servants, flocks. Everything he built over 20 years moved slowly across the ford of Jabbok. The water swallowed their footsteps. One by one, torches disappeared into the dark, until he was alone. That was intentional. He told himself it was strategy. If Esau attacked, the camp was divided, damage minimized. But this wasn't strategy. This was isolation. And isolation is where truth gets loud. The night pressed in. Crickets screamed. Wind dragged across dry ground. Somewhere in the distance, an animal howled. Jacob felt something tightening in his chest. Tomorrow he would see the brother who once swore to kill him. Tomorrow everything could end.
and for the first time in years, he could not calculate his way out. No manipulation, no disguise, no deal to negotiate, just confrontation. He bent forward, hands on his knees, breathing hard. "God," he whispered into the dark. But heaven did not answer with a voice. It answered with impact. A force slammed into him from the side. No warning, no sound of footsteps, just weight. Violent, sudden. They hit the ground hard, dust exploded into the air. Jacob gasped, rolling, trying to break free, but the figure was strong. Not just strong, unyielding. This was no thief, no soldier, no bandit. This was deliberate, calculated, and terrifyingly silent. Jacob swung wildly, catching fabric, skin he couldn't tell. They struggled in the dirt. Grunts, breath, strain, no words exchanged, just combat. The man moved like he knew him, anticipated him, countered him. Every attempt to overpower was met with superior control. Jacob felt it immediately. This opponent was different. He fought like someone who wasn't trying to win quickly, like someone testing him, breaking him down, minute after minute. The night stretched, muscles burned, sweat mixed with dust until his skin felt like clay. Jacob tried to pin him, failed, tried to twist free, countered. It felt less like a fight for survival and more like a confrontation with exposure. Each movement forced something out of him: anger, fear, guilt. The fight wasn't just physical, it was memory. His father's blind eyes, his brother's broken cry, Laban's deception, his wife's rivalry, the idol hidden beneath Rachel, the fear of Esau marching with 400 men. Every unresolved piece of his life seemed to wrestle through this stranger's grip. "Who are you?" Jacob growled through clenched teeth. No answer. The silence unnerved him more than threats would have. Hours passed. The sky began to thin at the edges. The faintest gray threatened the horizon. And that's when Jacob felt it. A shift. The man's hand moved with terrifying precision. 2 fingers pressed into Jacob's hip. Just a touch. Not a punch. Not a blow. A touch. Pain detonated through his body, white-hot, blinding. His hip tore from its socket like it was nothing. Jacob screamed, collapsed to one knee. The strength drained from his leg instantly. This wasn't human. No human does that with a touch. Terror replaced aggression. This was something else, something he should have recognized earlier. The man stepped back slightly, not winded, not shaken, untouched by exhaustion. "Let me go," the voice finally said. And the voice, it carried authority that vibrated through bone. Dawn was breaking. Light crept across the bank. Jacob's mind raced. Let him go? After all this? After the pain? After the confrontation? After a lifetime of fighting for blessing? No. No more running, no more stealing, no more manipulating. He lunged forward despite the agony, wrapped his arms around the man's torso, clung like a drowning man. "I will not let you go unless you bless me." The words tore out of him, not polished, not strategic, desperate.
For the first time in his life, he wasn't trying to outwit, he was surrendering. The man stilled. Silence fell heavy between them. "What's your name?" The question pierced deeper than the dislocated hip. He could have said anything, could have deflected, but he didn't. Jacob. The word tasted different now. Supplanter, manipulator, heel grabber. It wasn't just a name, it was confession. The man's voice softened, but did not weaken. "You shall no longer be called Jacob." Pause. The air felt suspended. But Israel. The name landed like a verdict and a gift at the same time. For you have struggled with God and with men and prevailed. Prevail?
He was on his knees, broken, limping, breath ragged. How was this prevailing? And that's when it hit him. Prevailing wasn't overpowering. It was refusing to let go, even when broken, even when exposed, even when it cost him. The man placed his hand on Jacob's head, not violently, firmly. Authority transferred, identity rewritten. The presence lifted, not gradually, instantly, like light folding back into itself. Jacob collapsed fully into the dirt, alone. The sun broke over the horizon, golden light spilling across the riverbank. He tried to stand. Pain shot up his side. He staggered, limped, but he stood. He looked at his reflection in the water. Same face, same scars, but something had shifted behind his eyes. The man who arrived at this river was afraid of his brother. The man who left it had faced God and survived. He named the place Peniel, for I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved. The camera pulls back. Jacob limps toward his family waiting across the river, toward Esau, toward reconciliation. He walks slower now, not because he's weak, but because he no longer runs. The limp is permanent, a reminder. He once fought for blessing in darkness. Now he carries blessing in daylight, and this time he didn't steal it. Dawn rose slowly. Esau approached, 400 men. Jacob walked ahead of his family, alone. No disguise, no manipulation, only humility. He bowed once, twice, 7 times, each bow stripping pride, each step dissolving fear. And then Esau ran, not with a sword, with tears. They collided in an embrace that rewrote years of hatred. Jacob closed his eyes, not because he feared a blow, but because he had finally stopped running. The boy who left home was calculating, ambitious, insecure. The man who returned limped, but he was whole. He had been deceived, manipulated, exiled, blessed, broken, and rebuilt. And sometimes that is what exile does. It does not destroy you, it reveals you. And the journey to Laban's house was never about marriage or wealth or survival. It was about transformation. Because you can steal a blessing once, but you cannot steal peace. Peace is wrestled for and earned and embraced like a brother you once feared.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next episodes.